Earth Girl and Space Captain, Episode 1, The Great Cosmic Wowee. Written and read by Shan McFadden. Part 1. Lily knew that the universe was about to explode. The captain had told her so, and now she was following him through the smoky corridors of his doomed spaceship. Sirens blared all around her as explosions shook the hull. The artificial gravity faltered for a moment, and Lily lost her footing, falling face first onto the deck. "Wait for me!" she called out. Captain Stylus turned. His eyes were wild, and his curly plume of purple hair hung messily across his forehead. Reaching down to help her, he shouted, "Hurry up now! The end of the universe won't wait for a slow-poke Earth girl, you know. The escape pods are only a few hundred feet away. Come on now, lazy bones, let's get to it!" Lily looked at his outstretched hand and cried, "But I'm not supposed to be here! I'm supposed to be playing volleyball!" This might have been a funny thing to say at that particular moment if it hadn't been 100% absolutely true. Lily wasn't supposed to be sprinting through a spaceship with the universe ending around her. At that very moment, she was supposed to be playing volleyball with her school team at the regional championship quarterfinals. After all, she'd been practicing for ages, spending countless hours bumping the ball over the makeshift net her parents had built for her in the backyard. And that's just where she'd been, and that's just what she'd been doing when she first met the captain. Standing there in the warm summer sun, Lily had lined up a shot and smashed it over the net, aiming for a perfect little patch of grass on the other side. Only it didn't hit the grass. Instead, it collided violently with the face of a strange-looking man that had appeared there suddenly in a bright flash of light. "Youch! We're under attack!" screamed the man as he flew backward. He landed on the ground with his long, skinny legs flailing in the air. Lily gasped and covered her mouth, but before she had time to react, a second flash of light appeared, and then, standing right there in front of her, was the strangest person she'd ever seen. The being was tall, taller than Lily anyway, and vaguely feminine. It wore black shiny boots and black gloves, and a crisp white uniform with a buttoned-up square-shouldered jacket. But its facial features were absolutely astounding. While it appeared at first to be hairless, upon closer inspection, Lily could see that the creature's head and face were covered in small, pale blue feathers that laid flat to its skin like the scales of a reptile. The feathers stood up slightly in small tufts like eyebrows above the piercing green, wide-set eyes. A pointed, feathery, beak-like nose sat above a small, thin mouth. The creature stared at Lily and cocked its head slightly, examining her. "Arrest it, Lily!" shouted the man on the ground, the man Lily had hit with her ball. "It tried to kill me! Arrest it at once!" The creature gave Lily another long look, then turned to the man and said in a surprisingly soft and gentle voice, "Sir, it's a child. I believe that this was an accident. She was not trying to kill you." The man on the ground stood up suddenly and pointed at Lily with one hand while holding his swollen nose with the other. "She's an assassin, Lily. She tried to bludgeon me with a power core. Oh, my beautiful nose. My lovely, lovely nose. I think it's broken. Sprained, at least. Either way, I doubt I'll be able to put any weight on it. Oh, what a scandal!" Lily was surprised to see how lean and tall the man was. His arms and legs were terrifically long and lanky. He was wearing a crisp white uniform as well, but his had the emblem of a blue and gold horizontal bar pinned to the left chest pocket. He had a wide face with a very pronounced chin and big ears that stuck out at a comical angle. His vibrant purple hair hung neatly in a thick curly swirl on his forehead. The creature called Thlaly reached down and retrieved the ball, then said, "I believe there's been a mistake, Captain. This is not a power core." "Look at it, Thlaly. Are you blind? Of course it's a power core," shouted the captain. He turned to Lily and said, "What are you, some kind of a maniac? Don't you know how dangerous these things are? If you'd breached the core casing, we'd all have been blown sky high." Lily was still in shock. She stammered as she tried to catch her breath. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I don't really know what's going on here." "Here's what's going on," snarled the captain. "You're under arrest for the attempted assassination of a decorated space commander." He crossed his long arms and shouted, "Thlaly, arrest her. We're leaving at once." Thlaly frowned and with a concerned tone said, But Captain, may I remind you that the signal we were following ends at these coordinates. We should continue our investigation. The captain grimaced and said,
There's nothing here. It's a dead end. Besides, we don't have time for investigations. Not now when we have an assassin to imprison. Arrest her now and take her aboard the Bystander.
But Captain, Flaley began.
Don't argue, Flaley, the captain spat. Just do what I say. That's an order.
With great reluctance, Flaley stepped forward and took Lily gently but firmly by the wrist. Then, with a sigh, she leaned in close and said softly, I'm very sorry about this. The captain can sometimes be difficult. But everything will be okay, I promise you. Lily was suddenly hit with a wave of full-blown panic. She began backing away from the two strangers, trying in vain to break Flaley's grasp, and called out in a weak voice, Mom! Dad, help! The last thing that Lily saw was the captain fiddling with something on his wrist, and then she was blinded by an intense wave of impenetrable white light. For a long, dreamlike moment, she felt weightless, as though she were at the highest point of a very high jump on a trampoline. She closed her eyes, but the light was so bright that she couldn't even see the inside of her eyelids, just a solid and unwavering field of brightness. She suddenly felt very dizzy and then very cold, and a moment later she felt her feet back on solid ground. The blazing light subsided as quickly as it had appeared, and she blinked repeatedly as she tried to determine where on Earth she was. The first thing that became evident was that she wasn't on Earth at all. She was now standing in what appeared to be the busy control room of a huge spaceship. The roof of the control room was a transparent dome that gave her a staggering view of the dark universe looming outside. She was surrounded on all sides by crew members of various shapes, sizes, and species, all of them operating rows of complex-looking equipment. Some of the crew looked quite human, but most of them were strange and wonderfully alien in their appearance. Lily saw creatures that looked like lizards, and some that looked like giant bugs, and some that looked like octopuses with lots of long tentacles. There was even one that looked to Lily like a big human-shaped flower, with thick leafy arms and a head covered in multicolored petals. Each crew member wore an identical crisp white uniform, and each outfit was tailored to the individual wearer's anatomy. Lily gasped as something resembling a large yellow praying mantis looked up from its console and gave her a friendly nod. Stunned, Lily cried, I didn't mean to do anything to you. I just want to go home, please. The captain towered over her, and with a snarl he spat,
So, you tried to take off my head with a deadly explosive, and now you dare to deny it. Maybe the stockade's too good for you. Maybe I should just dump you out the airlock.
The captain pointed to a rounded metal door set into the control room wall. Through the airlock's small window, Lily could see stars twinkling against the blackness of space. She started to feel faint as she imagined herself floating aimlessly in the frozen, airless void. Flaley stepped between them, still holding the volleyball in her hand, and said, quite calmly, Captain, if I may interject on the prisoner's behalf. Then she quickly turned her wrist and threw the ball forcibly at the floor. The captain shrieked and dove for cover, scattering a group of shocked crew members as he disappeared behind a nearby console. The ball bounced harmlessly on the ship's deck before rolling to a stop by Lily's feet. Very slowly the captain's head peeked out from behind the console. His eyes were wide with amazement as he whispered, We're still alive. It didn't explode at all. No, sir, said Flaley patiently. That's because it's not a power core. In light of Flaley's revelation, the captain's mood changed immediately.
Really? How marvelous! He exclaimed.
He leaped playfully over the console, scooped up the ball, held it against his nose, and took a long, drawn-out sniff.
Smells like dirt and grass.
Then he very slowly stuck out his tongue, wriggling it toward the ball like a big plump inchworm. He gave the volleyball a cautious lick, then turned to Flaley, eyes wide with delight, and shouted,
Flaley, you have to taste this. It tastes just like dirt and grass, too.
Thank you, sir, said Flaley flatly, as the captain pressed the ball against her face. But no, thank you, sir. The captain frowned and said,
Yes, well, you're lost then.
He then held the ball only inches away from his eyes and said,
"Well, if it's not a power core, what in blazes is this marvelous device?"
"As I said, sir, it's a ball," Flaley replied. "Earth children use it for playing games."
"Games?"
he muttered.
"Earthlings throw imitation power cores at one another and call it a game? I think I like this planet, Flaley. They really know how to have fun."
The captain tossed the ball to her, and instinctively and without hesitation, because she'd done it so many times before, Lily put her fists together and bumped the ball 3 times in the air, then popped it up with a little spin, caught it in one hand, and brought it to rest in the crook of her arm. Lily suddenly felt less afraid. "My name's not Earth Girl, by the way. It's Lily, and I play volleyball. I'm in the regional championships." His eyes opened wide with amazement, and the captain gasped,
"I have no idea what that means, but I bet it's something fantastic. The way you bobbled the ball in the air like that was an incredible display. Outstanding! I'm literally blown away. Wasn't that marvelous, Flaley?"
"Marvelous, sir," said Flaley with the hint of a smile. "So I take it she's no longer under arrest, then?" The captain scowled and stroked his chin.
Well, good point. There needs to be some form of punishment for accidentally assaulting a space captain. Do you by chance have any candy?"
Lily felt around in her pockets and heard the familiar crinkle of a candy wrapper. She quickly produced a small red foil-wrapped cube and passed it to the captain. "It's a berry blastaroo. They're my favorite, but they're a bit sour." The captain snatched it rudely from her hand, quickly unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. He frowned for a moment and squinted while he chewed. Then his eyes widened madly, and he turned to Flaley and said,
"Flaley, my taste buds are in berry heaven. It's delicious, so fruity. Here, smell my breath."
The captain stood in front of Flaley and placed his open mouth so close to her face that it looked like he meant to swallow her pointy nose. Then he exhaled loudly and said,
"Smell it. Go on, smell it. What do you think of that?"
Flaley gave the slightest of eye rolls and said, "Yes, sir. Very fruity, sir." The captain patted Lily on the shoulder and said,
"Thanks for that, Earth Girl. You are officially pardoned. All crimes forgiven."
Then he took on a very serious tone, bowed his head, and said,
"Welcome aboard the starship Bystander. I'm Captain Cooper Stylus. This is my first mate Flaley, and this is our intergalactic interspecies crew. Our mission is to observe, record, and catalog all instances of the Great Cosmic Wowee."
Lily frowned and said, what's a Great Cosmic Wowee?"
"What's the Great Cosmic Wowee?"
gasped the captain in disbelief.
"Why, it's only the most spectacular and extraordinary thing in all of existence. Hence the name Wowee."
He wiggled all 10 of his long fingers in her face, just to accentuate his point. The captain looked to Lily, fully expecting to see her share his sense of wonder. Instead, she just looked at him blankly and said, I don't get it." Disgusted, the captain scowled at her and said,
"Oh, fine then. Just turn around and I'll show you."
He pressed a button on his wristband, and Lily turned to see an astounding sight. The wall behind her transformed from solid metal to a huge view screen that filled the entirety of her peripheral vision. On the screen, she could see millions and millions of stars, as well as the brilliant burning orb of the distant sun. But the most prominent and dazzling object in her field of view was a churning cloud of pure energy, pulsating with blindingly bright purple light.
"What is it?"
Lily gasped. Flaley put her hand on Lily's shoulder. "The Great Cosmic Wowee is in many ways the polar opposite of what your people call a black hole. But unlike a black hole, things aren't sucked into the Great Cosmic Wowee. Rather, things are created within and projected out."
"Wondrous, mysterious things,"
said the captain breathlessly. Lily looked up to see him staring at the Wowee with a mesmerized expression. She could see the purple glow of the Great Cosmic Wowee reflected in his eyes. Thlalie continued, "What it is or where it comes from is completely unknown, at least to us. But what we do know is that it appears at random intervals all around the universe. And every time the Great Cosmic Wowee appears, something unpredictable, unique, and unexpected is created nearby. Our mission is to determine where the next manifestation will occur. We do that by tracking the energy signatures that appear just prior to a Wowee incident. We followed one such signal to your backyard." "The Great Cosmic Wowee is going to happen in my backyard?" Lily gasped. "Possibly," said Thlalie. "We were following a weak signature, but it died out just after we arrived at your home. The energy signals are notoriously hard to track. They move in unpredictable patterns, often shifting in location and sometimes even moving backward and forward in time. So it's entirely possible that even if a Wowee manifestation was to occur at your home, it might have done so in the past or perhaps in the distant future." Astounded, Lily stared out at the Great Cosmic Wowee as it boiled and swirled, a spinning vortex of violet light imposed against the deep black tapestry of space. She jumped, startled, as the Wowee suddenly expanded in a burst of energy to nearly twice the size it had been a moment before. "What just happened?" Lily asked. Quite matter-of-factly, Thlalie said, "That was an expansion pulse, the first of many. After its initial materialization, the Wowee will continue to expand in a series of pulses until it reaches threshold, at which point the universe as we know it will simply explode." "What?" said Lily, suddenly awakened from her trance. "I thought you just said that the Wowee made new things, not destroyed them." All she could think of was her mom and dad, her cousins, her grandma, and all of her friends back on Earth, gone forever with no way to save them.
"Relax, Earth Girl," smirked the captain. "It's already happened millions of times. Everything will be gone for a microfraction of a millisecond, so quick that human consciousness can't even register it. Ever see the lights flicker in your house or forget what you were going to say in the middle of a conversation? That's the Wowee taking the universe apart. Then, in the blink of an eye, the Wowee puts everything back together, exactly as it was, except it adds this one new and wonderful thing that it's created. Don't you understand, Earth Girl? The Great Cosmic Wowee is secretly upgrading the universe."
Then Thlalie said, "And even more mysteriously, when the Great Cosmic Wowee upgrades the universe, it even adds in memories of the new thing it created. No one even realizes that something new's been added. No one except us. The advanced energy shielding on the bystander safeguards us against the effects of the Great Cosmic Wowee. We alone are able to follow and track its progress." Lily, Thlalie, and the captain all stood quietly for a moment, staring out at the Wowee. Then the captain abruptly gave Lily a friendly clap on the back.
"So what do you think, Earth Girl? Pretty fantastic, huh? Bet you can't wait to get yourself a snappy white uniform and become part of our crew."
Lily turned to the captain with a shocked expression and said, "I can't stay here. I need to go home. I need to see my mom and dad." The captain's mouth dropped open, and he scowled so deeply that his brows almost completely obscured his eyes. Then he sputtered,
"Thlalie, it sounds like she's saying no. Is that what you're doing, Earth Girl? Are you saying no? What's all this nonsense about parents? Who needs parents? I never had any, and look how I turned out. Besides, your ridiculous parents won't even know that you're gone."
"Oh, I'm pretty sure they will," Lily snapped. "They'll look outside and see I'm gone, and they'll get really worried."
"No, they won't. They won't miss you at all. Oh, for goodness sakes. I tagged you with my time tagger before we brought you on board. There's really no problem."
He held up his hand to show a narrow metal wristband that featured a series of buttons and switches and a small inset display screen. "Well, what the heck is that supposed to mean?" said Lily. She was getting fed up with the captain's rude and demanding behavior. Sensing Lily's frustration, Thlalie intervened. "Lily, a time tag is like a save point in time. The bystander has advanced time jump technology. Once you've been time tagged, we can travel backward in time and return you to that specific moment without anyone else noticing."
"So we can take you back, Earth Girl, whenever you like. And your mummy and daddy won't even know that you were gone."
The captain then pretended to wipe fake tears from his eyes just to show Lily how unconcerned he was about her parents' feelings. Flaley shook her head and gave Lily an apologetic look, then said softly, "Lily, knowing that you can go back to that exact moment you left, whenever you want, will you join us?" Lily thought about it for a long, long moment. As ill-tempered as the captain was, she got the feeling that he was a man of his word, and she felt certain that Flaley would keep her safe. If it was true that she could see all these wonderful things that no one else knew about, without anyone knowing that she was gone, then she had absolutely no reason to refuse. "Maybe just for a little while," she said with a shrug. The captain practically exploded with enthusiasm.
"Excellent! Wonderful!"
he shouted, clapping his hands.
"Let's celebrate! Flaley, do we have any cake? We need cake, and maybe pie too. Oh, and s'mores, and those little cookies with the jam in the middle. The cute ones, you know. Tell me we have some of those, please."
"I can check, sir," said Flaley. She gave Lily a quick wink and whispered, "You see, Lily, I told you everything would be all right. The captain is a strange fellow, but he can be quite reasonable, given the right circumstances." Lily smiled appreciatively, but a second later the captain took her by the hand and tugged her along behind him as he strode across the deck. He had her volleyball tucked under his other arm as they walked.
"Now take a look at this, Earth girl,"
he said. They approached a wide cabinet made of a sturdy, transparent material. Inside the cabinet, a number of large white spheres floated on a cushion of pulsating blue energy. They rotated slightly as they hovered, but none of the spheres touched one another within the cabinet. The captain pressed his face up against the clear cabinet door and said,
"See, Earth girl, these are 1257G Lithonian rechargeable power cores. Look familiar to you?"
Lily nodded. She was surprised at how much they looked like her volleyball.
"So you can see that it was a perfectly reasonable mistake, me confusing your ball for a power core."
He gently opened the cabinet door and retrieved one of the floating cores, then held it and the volleyball side by side, one in each hand.
"One of these little fellas holds enough concentrated power to run the entire control deck for half a day."
A short, nervous-looking humanoid crewman approached the captain and said in a trembling voice,
Sir, the 1257Gs are surprisingly delicate. We should probably put it back in the stasis chamber now."
The captain scoffed and said,
"Nonsense, Jimmy. I'm the captain of this ship, and I'm completely knowledgeable in the care and handling of power cores. You're not second-guessing your commanding officer, are you, Jimmy?"
"No, sir,"
sputtered the man, blushing.
"And my name's not actually Jimmy, sir."
"It's not? Well, what in blazes is it then?"
"Trayberry, sir."
Jimmy Trayberry?"
asked the captain hopefully.
"No, sir. Alan Trayberry."
"Well, I could have sworn your name was Jimmy. Are you new?"
"No, sir. I've been with you for 7 years."
"But I always call you Jimmy. Why in blazes do I keep calling you Jimmy then?"
"I'm not really sure, sir,"
said the man, his face now a deep, deep shade of red.
"I see,"
said the captain with an embarrassed grimace.
"Well, I won't make that mistake again, I assure you."
Then he brightened up and said,
"Say, Trayberry, have you seen what this kid can do with a volleyball? Here you go, Earth girl, show him your moves."
With that, he tossed Lily one of the spheres. The circular object sailed toward her, and she instinctively brought her fists together to bump it into the air. And it wasn't until the ball touched her skin that she realized it wasn't a ball at all. It was far too heavy, and its surface was hard and shiny, not spongy. Lily wasn't ready for the extra weight, and the power core popped off her wrists in an awkward motion, pitching forward at a low angle.
"Run for your life, Jimmy!"
shouted the captain as he forcefully pushed Trayberry aside. The little man howled in terror as the power of the captain's throw flung him across the room and sent him pinwheeling into a group of his fellow crewmates. Then the captain shouted,
"Earth girl, don't let it hit the deck or we're done for! Keep it in the air!"
Everything seemed to melt into slow motion for Lily, with several things happening simultaneously. She saw crew members abandoning their consoles, fleeing for safety. She saw Flaley press a button on a nearby console and heard the first bells of an emergency alarm clanging. She saw the captain running, purposefully and with great determination, in the direction of the airlock she'd seen earlier. And most surprisingly of all, she felt herself jumping forward, not away from the core, but toward it, her arms outstretched, her fingers reaching to catch it before it hit the ground. She slid across the deck on her stomach as the core fell closer and closer toward its moment of deadly impact. Finally, she felt her fingertips touch the core's smooth shell, but in that moment, she realized that it was too heavy, knew that she wouldn't be able to control it well enough to catch it, so out of desperation, she did the only thing she could. She slipped the tips of her fingers under the core and scooped it back into the air. She rolled quickly onto her back, watched the core soar up and away from her, realized that it was now too far away for her to ever catch it, and readied herself for the explosion that she knew was coming. Part 2. Lily lay on her back on the deck of the Bystander, her ears filled with ringing sirens and the terrified voices of crewmates. She watched in vain as the power core she tried so desperately to catch careened through the air on a trajectory that guaranteed direct impact with the deck, and the almost certain obliteration of the ship and everyone that was in it. But instead of an explosion, Lily heard a tremendous whooshing sound, and then felt all of the oxygen rush out of the room. She turned her head to see the captain standing by the airlock, his hand on the control console that had just opened the outer hatch. He was bracing himself, flattened against the wall, struggling to keep from being pulled out into the dark void of the universe. Lily watched as the power core was abruptly sucked out across the room and through the open hatch. She experienced a moment of brief elation, which turned immediately to panic, as she realized that she too was being pulled by the wind gusting out of the open hatch. Laying on her back on the floor, she was just too small and had too little traction to stop herself from being dragged inch by inch toward the airlock. She scrambled in vain to reach her feet, but it was no use, and she saw the doorway looming before her, with the open cosmos just a few feet beyond. Then she felt Flaley's arms wrapped around her as the first mate dove across the floor and pinned Lily safely to the ground. A split second later, the captain closed the hatch and oxygen flooded back into the room. With an embarrassed smirk, the captain took a gasping breath, straightened his collar, and with a shrug, shouted to be heard above the sound of the sirens.
"Sorry about that, everyone. Honest mistake. Show's over. We're all fine now."
Flaley helped Lily up, then ran to the observatory window. "Captain, when the power core was sucked out the airlock, it did not achieve sufficient velocity to clear the ship's gravity well. It's being dragged alongside the Bystander. There's a possibility it may get sucked into the..." Flaley stopped abruptly as Lily felt the ship shudder. A massive explosion flared outside the window. Flaley turned. Her face was expressionless, but there was a twinge of panic in her voice as she shouted, "Captain, the core has detonated inside the main engine housing. Our engines have been completely decimated. Fires in the aft deck and life support terminals. We are drifting toward the Great Cosmic Wowee. We estimate that the Wowee will reach critical pulse in 3 minutes, 27 seconds. We need to abandon ship before..."
"I know what will happen, Flaley,"
said the captain. His face was fierce, and his eyes were narrow and smoldering. "What will happen?" Lily asked. She looked out the observation portal and saw the purple writhing mass of the Great Cosmic Wowee looming before them. It definitely seemed to be getting bigger, brighter, and closer. Flaley looked to Lily with sad, regretful eyes as she said, "Lily, anything caught within 100 kilometers of a Wowee occurrence is absorbed by the Cosmic Wowee itself. If we fly into the Wowee when it erupts, it will be worse than dying. We will become part of it, and we won't be rewritten after the universe explodes. We will be deleted from existence. It will be as though we never existed at all." "I don't want to never have been born," cried Lily. The captain looked at Flaley with a stern and uncompromising expression and said,
"Abandon ship, Flaley. Get this girl and the rest of the crew to the life pods."
"Yes, Captain," said Flaley, bowing her head. She took Lily tightly by the hand and led her toward a hallway at the rear of the observation deck. All around her, panicked crewmates were rushing to evacuate the ship. "What about the captain?" Lily shouted. "He'll find a way. He always does." Lily looked back, and for a brief moment she could see the captain. He was facing away from her, standing in front of the observatory window, his dark silhouette framed against the approaching stormy purple energy cloud. She saw him raise an angry fist and shake it at the Cosmic Wowee. He was shouting something that she couldn't hear. Then her view of him was blocked by a shower of sparks and soot. Another explosion rocked the ship, and Lily was thrown against the bulkhead, with bits of metal and ruptured vents falling all around her. When she regained her footing, she was alone, and the control room was rapidly filling with a haze of smoke. Pipes, metal, and scattered debris blocked her view at every turn.
"Flaley!"
cried Lily.
"Help, Flaley! Where are you?"
A moment later, she heard Flaley's distant, muffled voice. "Lily, can you hear me? I lost sight of you in the smoke. I can't get to you through this wreckage. I'll have to find another way around." Lily sat on the ground and covered her head with her hands and shivered with fear. The smoke was thick, and she coughed as she called out,
"Flaley, it's hard to breathe. I don't know what I should do."
Then she heard the captain's voice behind her.
"You should come with me and do exactly as I say."
He lifted her to her feet and shouted,
"I've got her, Flaley! You get out of here, now!"
Another explosion caused sparks and rubble to erupt around them. Lily called out to Flaley, but couldn't hear anything over the sound of the roaring sirens.
"Don't worry, she's a tough one, Earth Girl,"
said the captain as he strode off into the smog. Lily watched him go for a moment and then yelled,
"Hey, wait for me!"
A rapid series of concussive blasts rocked the ship, and Lily felt the artificial gravity falter. She floated in the air for a moment, weightless, then was slammed back down to the deck, the air driven out of her lungs by the impact. She looked up with unfocused eyes as the captain stood above her. He reached out to her and said something, but she couldn't understand what it was. All she could hear were muffled explosions and her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. She didn't remember much of what happened next. In a daze, she felt herself being dragged along, back through the now empty control room. She was only vaguely aware of the chaos taking place outside the observatory portal. The Cosmic Wowee now completely filled the window as the crippled ship drifted into the energy storm's massive, glowing maw. She saw the captain throw open a small hatch in the floor of the deck, and then felt herself being pushed down a small ladder inside of a narrow tube. A second later, she was thrown onto the padded bench of a cramped escape pod, then felt a pronounced jolt as the pod jettisoned away from the doomed spacecraft and the looming mass of the Great Cosmic Wowee.
"These are the secondary pods,"
explained the captain as he fiddled with switches and buttons on the control panel.
"Not very roomy, but they should be big enough for a strapping space captain and a measly little Earth girl."
Then his tone turned dark, almost breathless. In a hoarse voice, he whispered,
"Oh, look at this, Earth girl. Don't miss this. It's almost time."
Through the small pod's single window, Lily could see that the Wowee was now churning and raging with a series of violent energy storms. Plumes of light and plasma swirled on the Wowee's surface as the battered bystander made its final plunge into oblivion.
"Something terrible is about to happen,"
the captain said softly.
"But sometimes terrible things can be beautiful, too."
Suddenly and without warning, the Wowee expanded one final time and burst forth with a light so bright that Lily had no choice but to cover her eyes. As quickly as the incident had occurred, the light faded and died. Lily removed her hands to see nothing but empty space. Both the bystander and the Cosmic Wowee had disappeared. "It's gone," said Lily, swallowing the lump in her throat.
"It's not just gone. It was unwritten from existence,"
said the captain, his eyes darkening a bit.
"And at the same time, something new was just created somewhere, but we'll never know what it was."
His voice trailed off, and Lily noticed that this last point seemed to make the captain even sadder than the destruction of his ship. Lily sighed and asked, "Flaley and the others, did they—"
"Survive? Not likely. But if they did, they're in the same boat as us, so to speak, adrift in space with no one to save us."
Lily sat back on the bench and pulled her knees up to her chest. "So we escaped, but we're still going to die?"
"Well, I will probably, but not you."
The captain lifted up his gauntlet and pointed to the time tagger.
"The bystander automatically time tags me, the crew, and anyone else on board at regular intervals. But it tags us on the ship, and now the ship never existed. If I sent us back there, we'd essentially cease to exist ourselves. But I time tagged you on Earth right before we brought you on board, just in case we decided to send you back."
"So you can send me home?" she asked. "Back to my mom and dad, before any of this happened?"
"Yes," said the captain with a frown. "But there's a catch, and there's a favor I need to ask." The catch is that you were under arrest when I tagged you, so when you get back there, you'll need to convince me to let you go."
Lily understood. "And the favor?" The captain frowned and sighed, then said,
"Earth Girl, I've just destroyed my ship and possibly killed my entire crew and all of my best friends. I need you to stop me. However you can, I need you to stop me from doing it."
Lily swallowed hard and whispered, "Okay, I'll try." The captain nodded sadly and said,
"Very good. Thank you. You're a good girl."
He began adjusting the time tagger, and almost immediately Lily felt dizzy again, as though the room were spinning around her in a cyclone of blazing light. Her voice faltered as she cried out, "But what will happen to you?" His voice came back to her as though he was shouting from far away.
"If you stop me, then this version of the future will never happen, and everyone will be safe. But if you fail, I'll likely starve to death or run out of oxygen. So if it's not too much trouble, try not to mess it up. And if I cause you any problems, just show me this."
Lily felt the captain press something small and metallic into her hand, and then the spinning sensation became overwhelming. She felt herself being pulled away from this time and place, away from the captain.
"And just say candy apple,"
shouted the captain as his voice drifted away into the light.
"If I won't listen, just say candy apple. I'll know what it means."
And then his voice was gone. Lily closed her eyes and tried to steady herself, and when she opened them again, not only was the dizziness gone, but she was no longer in the life pod. She blinked in astonishment to find that she was standing in her backyard. Right in front of her, the captain was holding his nose and shouting,
"She's an assassin, Flaley. She tried to bludgeon me with a power core."
Lily looked down in her hand and saw what the captain had put there. It was his badge, his captain's insignia, his long horizontal bar of blue and gold. The clasp was undone, revealing the long, sharp gold pin that was used to affix the badge to his jacket. "I believe there's been a mistake, Captain," said Flaley as she examined the volleyball. "This is not a power core."
"Look at it, Flaley. Are you blind? Of course it's a power core," shouted the captain.
Lily rushed forward and, without even thinking, thrust the pin into the volleyball. With a dull pop, the ball rapidly deflated in Flaley's hand.
"What, are you crazy?"
shouted the captain as he reflexively covered his head.
"You could have blown us sky high."
Flaley gave a soft chuckle and held the deflated ball out for examination. "You see, Captain? As I said, not a power core." The captain looked at the ball suspiciously, then glared at Lily. She quickly handed him the insignia pin and said, "Here, you told me to give you this." The captain scowled, then looked down at the identical insignia on his own chest and said,
"Just what are you trying to pull here, Earth Girl? Some kind of sneaky Earth Girl trick? Maybe some time in the stockade will teach you not to be so sneaky."
"And you told me to tell you candy apple," Lily blurted out. "You told me that if I said candy apple, you'd know what it meant." The captain stared at her for a long moment. His face flushed as he took a series of long, deliberate breaths. Then he crossed his arms, looked sternly to Flaley, and said,
"Fine, let her go. Let's get out of here, Flaley, before anyone else tries to kill me."
Flaley looked at Lily curiously, and then in a flash of light, both she and the captain were gone. Overwhelmed by the events that had just befallen her, Lily sat down on her porch steps with her face in her hands. She was shaking, she was out of breath, but she was alive. Somehow she was alive, and she was home and she was safe, and so were Flaley and the captain and the rest of the crew. She was so completely absorbed in this moment of pure joy that she barely reacted as Flaley reappeared in front of her. She was alone. The captain was nowhere to be seen. "Don't be alarmed," said Flaley in her soothing tone. "I've come alone. The captain is receiving medical treatment for his nasal injuries." "It's okay, I'm not afraid," said Lily with a smile. It was true. She wasn't worried anymore. "You probably figured out that something happened, right?" Flaley nodded and with a gentle smile said, "I have a feeling that we may know one another better than I remember." Flaley sat down next to Lily on the step and said, "The captain sent you back, didn't he? Candy apple, that's his code word. We're only to use it if we time jump to avoid a catastrophe or to fix a terrible mistake. That's what happened, isn't it?" "Yeah," said Lily. "There was an accident. The captain and I got in an escape pod, but I think you might have died." "Then you saved me," said Flaley. "And the captain and the rest of the crew, I imagine. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. You are quite the extraordinary girl." "The captain doesn't seem to think so," Lily sighed. "He doesn't remember what happened. He thinks I was trying to trick him." Thaley chuckled and said, "Oh, I wouldn't be too sure of that. He knows that you did something important. He's just embarrassed that you may have saved him and not the other way around. He's a very prideful, arrogant man, our captain is. Impulsive and reckless. But he's a remarkable man, too. Fearless and brave, with a heart that's fierce and a mind that's unpredictable. He is completely unique, if you catch my meaning." Lily let Thaley's words hang in the air for a moment. Then she asked, "Thaley, where did he come from? He said that he didn't have parents." After a short pause, Thaley said, "I would never betray the captain's secrets, Lily. Not unless I knew that you'd already figured out the answer to your question." Lily thought long and hard about what she was about to say, then spoke. "He came from the Cosmic Wowee, didn't he, Thaley? He was one of the things that the Wowee created." With a sad smile, Thaley said, "Yes, I believe so. Many years ago, the crew of the Bystander were chronicling one of the first documented Wowee events. They tracked the energy signature to a completely barren planet, far, far away from here, a planet completely unpopulated, except for one small boy with bright purple hair. He didn't know where he was from or how he'd gotten there. He only knew that his name was Cooper Silas, and that he would one day be the captain of this ship. The crew at that time took the boy in, raised him, and sure enough, one day he did become the captain of the Bystander. Our captain." Lily felt her mind swimming with questions. There was so much more that she wanted to know, about the captain, about Thaley, about the Bystander and its crew, but Thaley cut her off. "That's all I can say, I'm afraid. But there's another, more important reason that I'm here. Do you remember the energy signature that we were tracking when we first appeared in your backyard? The crew checked the data, and it turns out that whatever the Wowee produced during this occurrence, it experienced a time stream fluctuation and actually traveled backwards in time before manifesting." "What does that mean?" Lily asked. Thaley's expression was quite thoughtful and serious as she said, "What that means is that whatever was created appeared right here, about 5 minutes before we sat down to have this conversation. Whatever it is, it arrived here before the captain and I did, and before your adventure even started." Lily stood up and searched the yard. Nothing seemed out of place. "But if that's true, then how will I know what it is, Thaley?" "Remember," she said, "when the Cosmic Wowee creates something new, it creates memories of that thing too. But I suspect that the shielding on the Bystander's escape pods should have left you immune to the effects of the reorganization. Your memories shouldn't be affected, so look for something that's out of place." Thaley reached into her pocket and produced what looked like a very small glass pyramid with an inset button on the very top of the peak. She held it in her feathered hand and passed it to Lily. "This is an alert beacon. If you press the button on the top, I will come for you, no matter where in time and space I am. So please, if you notice anything strange at all, call me at once." Lily took the beacon and said, "Okay, but—" Before she could finish, Thaley stood up, took a few steps, then turned and with a smile said, "Good luck, Earth Girl. I suspect that we'll be seeing one another again soon." Then, in a flare of blinding light, she was gone. From above her, Lily heard a window open. She looked up to see her mother smiling down at her from an upstairs window. "Who are you talking to?" her mother asked with a puzzled look. Lily thought about it for a moment, then said, "Nobody, just talking to myself." Her mom smiled and said, "Oh, well, okay, I hope it was a good conversation. Are you done practicing?" "Yup," said Lily with a sigh. "I've had enough for today." "Okay, then come in and wash up for dinner," said her mom. "And let the cat in, too." "The cat?" said Lily, confused. "We don't have a cat." Her mom laughed. "Very funny, wise guy. Just let Princess Puffy in. She must be getting hungry, too." Lily ran up the back steps, along the porch to the kitchen door, and then stopped suddenly. She looked down and gasped, clutching tightly to the beacon Thaley had given her. At Lily's feet was a small, white, fluffy cat. Around its neck it wore a pink collar with a tag that read Princess Puffy. The cat looked up at Lily. It didn't meow or purr or even blink. It just looked fixedly at her with a piercing, suspicious glare. Lily didn't say a word. She just kept staring at the cat's eyes. They were big and round, and a deep, dark shade of purple. This story will continue in Earth Girl and Space Captain, Episode 2, The Last Binkertoot. Written and read by Shan McFadden. Music by Audionautics.com.